So, Bezat Hashem, next week we'll be observing the holiday of Purim. So, we're discussing some of the customs, some of the halachot that you need to know for Purim. So, with regards to money that is given for Zekher, Lemahasit, Hashekel. So, in Halab it was customary, beginning from Rosh Chodesh Adar, and to collect the money, everybody was obligated to give. Every morning in Shahrit, there would be two rabbis sitting in the knis. The Shamosh would announce that they have to give Mahasit Hashekel, would remind everybody, and it was an obligation, so they made sure that everyone gave. There's a difference of opinion about how much one should give for Zekher the Mahasit Hashekel. According to some authorities, you should give the equivalent of the value of the silver of a Mahasit Hashekel, which Hakam Yosef tells us is 9 grams of silver. So you just go on, look at the market at that time of the year, or whatever it is that year, how much is 9 grams of silver. So now, that would be approximately $5 per person. However, there are other opinions that say that since we're not giving the actual Mahasit HaShekel, the actual Mahasit HaShekel only applied in the times of the Beth HaMikdash. Now what we're giving is a Zekher Ba'alma, it's just in memory of the Mizvah of Mahasit HaShekel. And therefore, it's not necessary to be so meticulous and to give the exact value that they gave in the times of the Beth HaMikdash when it was an actual mitzvah from the Torah. And therefore, many communities have the custom to give half of the currency in the country that they live in. So, for instance, that would translate into half a dollar, 50 cents per person. Now, we know that in Halab it's documented that they gave half of a Turkish Mejidi. When they were under Turkish rule, the Mejidi was the currency, and they gave half of a Turkish Mejidi for each one. So that would, like we say, would translate for us, our custom would be to give half a dollar. So it's not one should not feel obligated to give the value of the silver, since the custom in Halab and the general custom in the Middle East, and also amongst Ashkenazim as well, was to give half of the currency of the country that you live in. Now, on the Shabbat prior to Purim, it's known as Shabbat Zachor.
Who is obligated? Is it,
so it's customary.
Woman,
so it's customary that each member of the family, men, women, and children, give, and the reason is because even though in the times of the Beth HaMikdash only men gave, right, men over the age of Bar Mitzvah, but since the rabbis in the Midrash taught that the Mahasit HaShekel has another significance, it has a connection with the holiday of Purim. And the rabbis taught that the fact that we gave half a shekel every year for all the years of the Beth HaMikdash was in existence. Our shekalim that we gave preceded Haman's shekalim. So when Haman went to buy the right to destroy the Jewish people with his shekalim, they were powerless. They had no effect because we already preceded his shekalim with our shekalim during the time of the Beth HaMikdash. And therefore, since everyone was saved from the decree of Haman, men, women, and children, it's customary that money is given on behalf of all members of the family. So we were saying that the Shabbat prior to Purim is on Shabbat Zachor, and it was customary in Halab, and it's still customary in Brooklyn today, before you say Musaf prayer, to sing the first 3 stanzas and the last 3 stanzas of a poem known as Micha Mocha. That's a poem that was written by the Yehuda Halevi, the great Spanish poet from the 11th century. And basically it's a poetic rendition of the holiday of Purim. And many families have the custom to, when they come home after lunch, to read the entire Micha Mocha. It's in the back of the Siduri. Now with regards to reading the Megillah, there are some communities that have the custom to unroll the entire Megillah prior to reading the Megillah. Others unroll it as they read it. So the question is, what was the custom in Halab? We have documentation from Hakam Abraham Antebi, who was the chief rabbi of Halab in the 19th century, from other Halabi rabbis that they did not unroll the entire Megillah prior to reading the Megillah, not the reader for the congregation, and all the more so, not the congregants. The reader for the congregation would unroll the Megillah as he read it, but leave unrolled what he already read. He wouldn't roll it on the other end like a Sefer Torah. But the congregants who didn't have a big table in front of them would roll their Megillah like a Sefer Torah so that it wouldn't fall on the floor.
Which we do.
Well, you roll it on the other end when you right. The congregants do that. The reader leaves it unrolled until the end, and then when he finishes the entire Megillah, then he rolls the entire Megillah back, and then he recites the Berakha afterwards. So all this is the difference in customs is based on two different textual versions of the teaching of Rav Hai Gaon. So there was a difference of opinion amongst the Geonim whether we read the Megillah like a Sefer Torah, which means you would roll it, or you would read it like an Igerit, like a letter. So the halakha is like Rav Hai Gaon, that you read it like a letter. But the question was, did he say Koreh ufoshet, read and unroll, or did he say Poshet vekoreh, unroll and read? So many of the Ashkenazic authorities have the textual version Poshet vekoreh, unroll and read, which they understood to mean unroll the entire Megillah and then begin reading it. But the majority of the authorities, especially the Sephardic authorities, all have the textual version Koreh ufoshet. So when you say Koreh ufoshet, it means begin reading it and unroll it as you read it. And then since it has to be like any get it, you leave what you read already unrolled. So basically the opinion of the Rosh, the Rif, Harambam, Maran is all Koreh ufoshet. Read it and unroll it as you read it. That was a custom in Halab. The Ashkenazim generally unroll the entire Megillah first, but there are many Sephardic authorities as well that instruct instruct at least the reader for the congregation to unroll the entire Megillah. That includes the Ben Ish Hai, the Kaf Hayim, the Pri Hadash. The custom in Halab was not like the Ben Ish Hai or the Kaf Hayim for this. It was like Maran and Hanambam. As we said, you unroll it as you read it.
It says, I'm sorry to interrupt, like a letter, but sometimes you can get a 5-page letter
Right.
to an important someone, and
Right.
they don't really lay it out. They just read it one page at a time.
So that's what we're doing. We're reading one page at a time. So you're supporting the custom of Halab. Yeah. So now in Halab there were two Jewish communities. There were the Mustarabim. They were the Jews, the native Jews of Aleppo, meaning that was the Jewish community that was in Aleppo from the times of the second Beit HaMikdash. And then there was another Jewish community in Halab known as the Sephardim, the Spanish Jews. And those are the Jews that arrived after the expulsion in 1492. They began arriving in the beginning of the 16th century. So the Mustarabim, the native Aleppian Jews, observed 2 days of Purim. They observed both the 14th day of Adar and the 15th day of Adar, meaning what many call Shushan Purim, right? They observed both days. The only difference in observance between the first day and the second day was that on the second day, when they read the Megillah, they didn't recite Berachot prior or after the Megillah, but they had Alanisim and the Amidot, they had Sefer Torah, they gave Mishloach Manot. They did all of the observances of Purim. That was the original custom of the Mustarabim. The Sephardim, coming from Spain, didn't have that custom. Now the reason why Halab and other Middle Eastern cities, Halab was not the only city, many of them observed 2 days of Purim, is because they weren't sure if their city was walled from the times of Yehoshua bin Nun. According to the Berakha, a city that was walled since the times of Yehoshua bin Nun observes the 15th of Adar, and cities that were not walled since the time of Yehoshua bin Nun observed the 14th of Adar. Since they weren't sure whether they were walled or not from that time period, they observed both days, and as we said, the only difference was that they didn't, when they read the Megillah on the second day, it was without Berachot. But over time, many of the observances of the second day became dropped even by the Mustarabim. And by the later period, they would read the Megillah without Berachot the second day. They would say Al Hanisim and Amidot, and they would have a Sefer Torah reading in honor of Purim. But they didn't give Mishloach Manot, they didn't give Matanot LaEbyonim, they didn't have a festive meal. And over time, the Sephardim adopted the custom of reading the Megillah on the second day without Berachot. So at the end, the only difference between the Sephardim and the Mustarabim was whether you say Al Hanisim and Amidot, and whether you have a Sefer Torah reading in honor of Purim. But all of this was only in Halab, where they were in the location where they weren't sure if the city was walled or not. But now once the Jews left Halab and they came to the Americas and they came to other locations, of course they only observed the first day of Purim. The second day, Shushan Purim, is a day that we say Yishem, as is customary in many places. Now, according to some later authorities, a man who already fulfilled his obligation of reading Megillat Esther, and now he's reading only on behalf of women. No man or men are fulfilling the obligation with this second reading. So, according to the custom of Halab and some authorities, they do not recite Berachot. They would read for the ladies without Berachot. The Hacham Yosef disagrees with this custom. The opinion, you find it in the Ben Ish Hai and the Kaf HaHaim as well. Hacham Yosef disagrees, and he holds that when you read for ladies, even though you fulfilled your obligation, even though you're not reading for men, you make the Berachot at the beginning of the Megillah, and even if you have 10 ladies, he allows you to make the Berakha Halab et Ribenu at the end of the Megillah. But as we said, the custom in Halab was like the Ben Ish Hai and the Kaf HaHaim with regards to reading for ladies, so they would read without Berachot prior or after. Now, in the prayers for Purim, the Mizmor that we say prior to Aleinu L'Shabeach, in Arbit usually we say Shir Manot, and in Ha usually we say Lam. So they replaced it with a different Mizmor. Both of them were replaced with Shir HaMa'alot David, Luleh Adonai Shehayalanu. And the reason for saying this Shir HaMa'alot is because the second pasuk has the phrase Bikum Aleinu Adam, when a man rose up upon us. And there are those that explain that this was prophetically referring to the holiday Purim, when Haman Harashat rose up against us and Hashem was with us. So that's the custom, is to replace the Mizmor both in Arbit and the following day in Mincha. Now, in reading the Megillah, some communities developed a custom to repeat certain words, meaning they read the same word two different ways. So, for instance, there's a pasuk in the 8th chapter which says V'laharog. They read it Laharog, and then they repeat it V'laharog. When you get to the 9th chapter, there's a word Lifnehem. They read it Lifnehem and Bifnehem. However, in Halab, we didn't read any words. It was not our custom to read any words twice. We have an oral tradition of how to read all the words in the Megillah. So we say Lifnehem, we don't say Bifnehem. We say V'laharog in that pasuk. We don't say Laharog. And there's another word that some read twice. That's where it says V'nikro'a b'shem. According to some opinions, it's V'nikre'a. Our tradition is to say V'nikro'a. So none of the words are repeated. We have a specific tradition of how to read each word, and we read it according to that tradition. So many people ask about the custom of wearing costumes on Purim. Where did it originate? Is it a Sephardi custom as well? So the truth of the matter is that the custom of wearing costumes originated with the Ashkenazim, and even...
Wasn't Party City? I want this, I can't.
So it originated amongst the Ashkenazim. Well, even amongst the Ashkenazim, there were several Ashkenazic rabbis that objected to the custom, including Rabbi Yeshaya Horowitz, the author of Shnei Luchot Habrit, known as Shelah HaKadosh, and also the Ba'er Heteb. There are Sephardic authorities that objected as well, including Rabbi Chaim ben Venisti, who was the author of Knesset HaGedolah, and Rabbi Meir Mazuz, the Rosh Yeshiva of Kiser Amim, in his book Sansan Le'Yair.
What, if I may interrupt, their thinking was objecting, that they were making light of the possible tragedy?
So, first of all, it's something that has no source whatsoever in the early sources. And they looked at it as something that led to like silliness or zaniness, and they didn't feel that it was appropriate for the day. It's supposed to be a spiritual day. And the truth is, the custom eventually made its way to the Middle East. Certain Middle Eastern communities adopted the custom.
When?
In later times, like the 19th or 20th century. And in that time, when it reached Halab, we have a report from the book Derech Eretz that the rabbis of Halab objected to the custom for the reasons that we were mentioning, that it leads to inappropriate attitude towards the day, becomes a silly day and not a spiritual day. However, there is another custom that originated amongst Ashkenazim that ended up finding favor with many Sephardic authorities, and that's the custom that some individuals would honor the day of Purim by wearing Yom Tob clothing, right? Because it says the word Yom Tov is used in the Megillah to describe Purim in a certain sense. Therefore, they would wear Bigdei Yom Tov. And as we said, it originated with Ashkenazim, but eventually we see that the custom is praised by the Haidah, by Rabbi Haim Palachi, by Rabbi Haim Abu Lafia. So many adopted that custom. One point that I forgot to mention is with regards to the Berakha that's recited after the reading of the Megillah. There are some versions that have Hakel Harab et Ribenu. Our custom is just to say Harab et Ribenu. This is based on the opinion, on the version that we find in Maran and Shulchan Aruch. But it dates back even prior to that. We find it in Mahzor Aram Soba, which is a 2-volume Siddur and Mahzor for the weekdays and for all of the holidays. It was printed in 1527, and there it also has Harab et Ribenu. So some have the custom of have a Hakel Harab et Ribenu. The custom of Halab was Harab et Ribenu. Now for some halachot that apply to the day of Purim. So in addition to the obligation of hearing the Megillah, reading both at night and again in the daytime, both men and women are obligated to give Mishloach Manot, they're obligated to give Matanot LaEbyonim, and all are obligated to partake in a festive meal on the day of Purim. So now the minimum obligation of Mishloach Manot is one food package that consists of 2 different foods. They learned that from the Pasuk. It says Mishloach Manot. Manot is plural. The minimum of plural is 2, so it has to have 2 foods in the package. Ish l're'ehu is singular, and therefore a person fulfills his obligation by giving 1 package to 1 friend, which means if someone doesn't have the time or the opportunity or he can't afford to buy so many packages, if he gave 1 package that consists of 2 different foods, then he fulfilled his obligation. But still in all, Maran and Harambam say that one who gives many packages, harez mishubah, it's considered praiseworthy. Why? Because when you give a package, you foster friendship amongst people. So therefore, if you give many packages, it's considered praiseworthy. Now the 2 different foods, contrary to a common misconception, do not have to be 2 different berachot. If you give something that's mizonot, you don't have to give something else that's ha'etz or shehakol. As long as the foods are different in some way. So for instance, if you can give 2 different kinds of cake, a chocolate cake and a vanilla cake, 2 different kinds of cookies. Yosef writes you, if you give chicken, you can give 2 different parts of the chicken, and it's considered different in some way, even though it's chicken, but you can give a leg and you give it together with the breast, well, it's a different flavor, and it's considered 2 different items. And you can give drinks as well. You can give a food with a drink or 2 different drinks, and you fulfill your obligation of Mishloach Manot. Now one does not fulfill his obligation of Mishloach Manot if he leaves the package somewhere, and before the recipient gets it, it gets lost or stolen. He didn't fulfill his obligation. He would have to send another package in order to fulfill his obligation. Also, you don't fulfill your obligation if you send a package anonymously, since one of the purposes of Mishloach Manot is to foster friendship amongst people. If the person doesn't know who he received it from, it doesn't foster friendship. So if you're going to leave the package outside, you have to make sure that your name is on it so you fulfill your obligation.
Does it have to be to a Jew?
Yeah.
Could it be a family member?
Yes, absolutely. You can give to your parents, you can give to your brother or sister, you can give to your rabbi. It doesn't have to be someone that's equal to you, even though it says that it could be somebody that you're obligated to respect. So when you give Mishloach Manot, you could either give it yourself or you could send it with a messenger. Now when you send it with a messenger, the messenger doesn't have to be Jewish. Furthermore, the messenger could be a child under the age of bar or bar mitzvah. Now when someone sends a package with a messenger, the assumption is that the messenger delivered the package, so you don't have to verify that the package was delivered in order to fulfill the obligation. Unless the messenger was a child under the age of bar or bar mitzvah, in such a case they're not considered as responsible as an adult messenger, and if you were fulfilling your obligation with the package that you sent with them, you would have to verify that the recipient got it. Now, you don't fulfill your obligation of Mishloach Manot if you give Mishloach Manot to a child under the age of bar or bar mitzvah. But you can fulfill your obligation of Matanot LaEbyonim by giving to a poor child who's under the age of bar or bar mitzvah. The idea is that there's no issue of fostering a friendship with a child. It's supposed to be between adults. But with regards to someone who's poor, even though they're underage, you're helping them out, and then would be considered Matanot LaEbyonim. Now, Mishloach.
Is there any halachic basis for giving a donation instead? There's been a trend recently where people are giving a donation to a charity in lieu of...
Right. Well, that's just in lieu of giving everybody Mishloach Manot. You still have to give one package. So if you wanted to avoid going to everybody's house and giving them food that perhaps they don't really need or want, and give charity instead in honor of that, honor of that person, you would still have to give at least one person the actual Mishloach Manot. Now, one only fulfills his obligation of Mishloach Manot with food or drinks. You cannot fulfill it by giving other types of gifts. So if you give clothing or furniture or books or even money, you don't fulfill your obligation of Mishloach Manot. With regards to Matanot LaEbyonim, it could either be money or food. But even Matanot LaEbyonim cannot be other types of items. So you can't give, as we said, clothing, linens, furniture, books. Cigars, no good. No good. So
like the Christmas.
Right, so it's for Mishloach Manot, it's only food or drinks. For Matanot LaEbyonim, it's food, drinks, or money.
Don't give money or a cigar.
So what is the minimum requirement of Matanot LaEbyonim? So Ebyonim is plural, so you have to give at least 2 poor people. And any amount that you give them, you fulfill your obligation according to the law. The legal requirement is to give something. So anything that's nitina, anything that's considered giving. So even a small coin, a person fulfills his obligation according to the law. There are others that are stricter, and the more stringent opinion is to give the value of a meal. However, the Ben Ish Hai defines the value of a meal as 6 ounces of bread with some accompaniment to the bread. So if you look at what is 6 ounces of bread sell for on the market today, it's under $1 with an accompaniment, maybe $1, $1.25, $1.50. So according to the law, you fulfill your obligation with any amount that you give. If you want to be stringent, you can give $1.50 to each of 2 poor people, and you fulfilled your obligation according to the more stringent opinion. We want to give more, mishubach, but we're talking about what the minimum requirement and what you're obligated to give is. Now, each member of the family has to give a package for Mishloach Manot. Each member of the family has to give 2 poor people. So if you have a married couple, and they give 1 package of Mishloach Manot, they can't both fulfill their obligation with that 1 package. They have to give a total of 2 packages. If they have children, for each one of the children that's over the age of bar or bar mitzvah, has to give at least 1 package of Mishloach Manot and give at least 2 money to charity to 2 poor people. Now, with regards to the Matanot LaEbyonim, Maran also writes, "En medaktekin b'ma'ot Purim." We're not careful with who we give the money to. Ela kol mi sheposhet yado litol notnim lo. So you try to give money to everybody that asks. Again, it could just be a nominal amount, and you fulfill your obligation. With regards to children under the age of bar or bar mitzvah, it's proper to train them to give Mishloach Manot and Matanot LaEbyonim. Once they reach the age of 6 and over, it's proper to train them with practicing those mitzvot as well. Now, with regards to the festive meal that everyone's obligated to partake in, according to Maran and Harambam, bread is not a requirement. However, there are some authorities that do require bread, and therefore many have the custom to eat bread for the festive meal in order to fulfill their obligation, according to all opinions. Since we have accepted Maran and Harambam as authoritative, one is not obligated to eat bread if he prefers not to. But Berakha Yosef writes that to begin with, it's preferable to eat bread. Now, since the Megillah calls the days of Purim Yemei Mishteh v'Simcha, days of feasting and happiness, and our rabbis have taught En Simcha ela b'basar, En Simcha ela b'yayin, right? There's no happiness without meat, there's no happiness without wine. Harambam writes that the Purim meal is supposed to have meat and wine. And Maran adds that even an onen is someone who lost a close relative, a relative that he has to mourn for. And prior to the burial of the deceased, he's considered an onen, and during that period of time between the death and the burial, he's not allowed to have meat, he's not allowed to drink wine. However, Maran writes that if it's a day of Purim, and he's an onen on that day of Purim, he may eat meat and he may drink wine in honor of Purim. So we see how important the meat and wine is.
If someone's sitting Shirah, does Purim break up the...
So there's no avilut b'farhisya. It's like Shabbat. You don't have any public display of mourning, but it doesn't break the mourning altogether like a holiday from the Torah. So, also with regards to the Purim meal, many sometimes neglect to have the meal until the last few minutes of the day. And they're coming 5 or 10 minutes before sunset, they're beginning their meal, and they're not eating the meal on the day of Purim itself. Most of the meal is being enjoyed after the day. So it's proper to start the meal on the day of Purim itself, so you could eat the meat and drink the wine on the day to fulfill the halachic obligation of a meal. So the question that everyone always asks, what about getting drunk on Purim? So Maran and Shulchan Aruch brings the Gemara that says Hayab inish lebasumeh befuraya ad de la yada ben arur Haman le Baruch Mordechai. So a person is obligated to drink on Purim until he doesn't know the difference between Haman is cursed and Mordechai is blessed. So there are various explanations to different ways to explain this statement. Maran the Bet Yosef quotes the Orchot Hayim, one of the Rishonim, that makes a distinction between shichrut, dishtaker, which means to actually get drunk, and the basomeh, which means to drink a little more than usual, which could be described as like getting tipsy. Right? And in the Sefer HaEshkol, he explains the continuation of the statement, ad de la yada, as referring to an old Purim song, where sometimes you would answer Baruch Mordechai, and sometimes you would answer Arur Haman. So the mitzvah was to drink until you get confused about the proper answer. You would answer Arur Haman when it's supposed to be Baruch Mordechai. I mean, just you drink a little bit till you're like a little confused, but not till you lose total control and get out of control and get crazy. So, in any case, we should all bear in mind the words of the Me'idi, one of the famous Rishonim, about drinking on Purim. So I'm reading a quote. We are not commanded to drink so much until we are drunk and then detract from our honor because of our happiness. Because we were not commanded to have an empty happiness of stupidity, but rather a happiness of enjoyment, which leads to the love of Hashem and to thank Him and to bless His name for the miracles that He did for us. So, meaning that Purim is not a day to get out of control or to behave in an unseemly manner, but rather to drink enough just to loosen up a little bit, sing, enjoy the festivities in a spiritual way. Do we have any questions before we conclude?
Where do we get making noise during Haman's name?
So we see that custom developed originally in France, but it spread to the Middle Eastern communities as well. There are rabbis that didn't like the custom, and there are rabbis that tried to stop the custom. Achavagya Yosef is against the custom because he says, even though it's a custom and it developed and it became accepted, in his view, a custom that prevents one from properly performing the mitzvah, meaning people can't hear the Megillah, they can't fulfill their obligation, so it's proper to eliminate that custom. But it definitely was practiced in the Middle East. We have clear documentation. Anything else? Okay, Purim Sameach.